Now, aha! Right, I'll go on to the slides now. But so that's when we started using Waterfall. It was basically in the late 80s that we started to do things which were a lot more complicated in information technology. A lot of volatility, a lot of change was required. And it was really at that point that we started needing to use different delivery approaches. So this is where Agile came. Things like Scrum, for example, which is one Agile approach, 1986. DSDM is another one, 1994. Extreme Programming is another one, early 90s. Lean software development is built on Lean, 1947. So this stuff, it's not new. You know, this Agile stuff, it's been around for quite a while. So this is myself and Jose. So he's just trying to position the camera, so I'm just going to annoy him now and just run about everywhere. So he can. And my name's Peter Measey. So just a brief introduction of me. So yeah, mainly IT. Been specialising in Agile since '94. Not only IT, but mainly IT. BCS Agile Committee. Certified Scrum Trainer, DSDM Trainer, also on the DSDM board. Prince 2, Project Management Institute Agile Certified Practitioner. You can see all the stuff on there. Actually, I worked at HMCE. I know we're HMRC now, but HMCE probably about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, helping to implement something called the Business Change Lifecycle. Now, the Business Change Lifecycle was based on DSDM, Dynamic System Development Method, which is one of the Agile approaches. And what the BCL did was it basically integrated Prince 2, OGC gateways, Euro gateways, MSP, some elements of ITIL, Agile. So it brought it all together into a coherent whole. Yeah. So this has been done before in this sort of environment. So that's me. What is Agile? Well, I was just starting to explain it there verbally, really. You know, the reason why Agile is called Agile, it's delivery and management approaches that enable us to work within environments that things change all the time. And generally, when we're thinking about information technology, things change a lot. So that's why lots of information technology organisations use Agile. But it's not just about IT. Back end of 2010, I was working with 4 PCTs, primary care trusts, Southampton, Hampshire, Isle of Wight and Portsmouth. What I was doing down there was working with them to basically put in place Agile health commissioning. So this was about commissioning dementia services into those 4 primary care trusts, nothing to do with information technology at all, and that was all done via a combination of DSGM and Scrum. Also recently, last 3 years or so, worked with Rolls-Royce to do what's called a PLM program, Product Lifecycle Management. This is one of the reasons actually that Rolls-Royce is now so successful again. They fundamentally changed the way that they develop engines. They fundamentally changed the business. The program they used to change the business was called PLM. That program was shaped in an Agile way. So we, as in there was a group of us there, were working with Rolls-Royce to help them do that. So another example of that much IT, that much business change. So in essence, wherever there's volatility, wherever you believe the requirements are going to change or you believe the technology might trip you up, that's where really you need to be using an Agile approach. If you're doing something where you can fully specify it up front and it's not going to change, that's where you use a waterfall approach. So generally nowadays, what we see within information technology, you know, the complexity that we do now, we get hit with a lot of change. And this is why Agile within business change and information technology projects is now the default approach. You know, most organisations have elements of Agile in, and indeed you certainly have had, and probably do now, certainly have had in the past and probably do now. So the slides I'm just flicking through here is, you know, what sometimes people hear when they hear this word Agile. Sometimes what programmers will hear is blah, 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 no documentation, which is a myth. You do have documentation in Agile, and I'll cover this in a bit more detail later on. Sometimes what managers hear is blah, 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 quicker, blah, cheaper, blah, 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 better quality, which are all good things. And yes, you do get that, but it's not the only things you get from Agile. So I'll talk through those in more detail as well. This diagram here, by the way, I should introduce how we're going to do this presentation. I'm planning to talk for around an hour-ish, something like that, hour and 10, something like that, and then have hopefully lots of questions at the end. So we can then go through anything else that you want to go through at that point. As I say, I have got a slide in here about Agile and SIM. I'm SIM on my level 3, but at the moment what I'm just doing is establishing, you know, what are the basics of this Agile malarkey. Everybody okay? And I do recognise a few faces in the room actually from back in the day, about 10 years ago, which is good stuff. So it's good news. Yeah. So Agile basically equals empirical. Empirical in essence means learning process. So this is a diagram from a chap called Professor Ralph D. Stacey. Professor Stacey is or was a professor from Loughborough University. He's a process engineering professor. He's not an information technology professor. Now Stacey's landmark work, which he produced in the mid-late 90s, is all about environments within which we deliver and what are the best delivery approaches for those environments within which we deliver. So this is a simplified version of one of Stacey's diagrams. What he's saying here is, if we have requirements which are very, very close to agreement, in other words, if we can define exactly in detail up front what we need to build, and then it's not going to change at all, and if we have technology that is absolutely certain and it's not going to trip us up or change at all, then basically, according to Stacey, we're in a simple delivery environment. As any of those things change, we move into either complicated or complex or anarchic delivery environments. And the point Stacey was making basically in his landmark paper was, depending on the environment within which we're going to deliver, we need to use certain styles of delivery approach. So what Stacey was saying is, if we're down here, we basically should use defined delivery approaches. So in other words, if we're in a simple environment where we're not going to hit change, we should use the same approach and we should always do the same steps in the same way every time. Always do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Yeah? If we move out into complicated, complex or anarchic, according to Stacey, that therefore means that things are going to change. So what we therefore need to do is have a learning process. So we need to do something, inspect that changing world, because it's changing, and then adapt to it. Do something, inspect the changing world, adapt. Do something, inspect, adapt. Do something, inspect, adapt. So basically we have a learning or empirical process. Now that is the foundation of Agile, and that's why Agile is called Agile. It enables you to deliver things in a way that is agile enough to stay in track with the changing world if the world is changing. So fundamentally, the key question is, should we use a waterfall approach or an agile approach? Well, it's not as simple as, waterfall bad, agile good, or agile bad, waterfall good. It's a case of saying, here are a number of delivery approaches. What's best suited for that which we need to do? And just to reiterate, when you're thinking about information technology, for example, or business change programs, anything with a business change element, it's generally very volatile. So generally, a waterfall approach isn't really suited for that sort of thing. The ultimate expression of things that are in here is automation, in effect. So in other words, if we always do the same things and we always do them in the same way, yes, then we should be able to automate that process. And this is what we've seen since the early Ford manufacturing lines. This is what we've seen in the Toyota way or lean manufacturing since 1947. The automation of things which are forced into this simple area. This is what we're currently seeing at the moment in EPOS systems, electronic point of sale systems. So, 10, 15 years ago, if you went to a shop to buy a can of beans, you'd pick your can of beans up, take it to the person on the checkout, they would then type in the price and you'd get your beans. That then turned into, you get your can of beans, it's got a barcode on, you give it to the person at the checkout and they scan it. That then turned into, we get the can of beans, we scan it ourselves. That will turn into, you take it off the shelf and it'll scan as you take it off the shelf. And that will turn into, your fridge will just look at what you normally order and order it for you without going to the shop. So this is an example of a process being driven down here. When it was complicated and complex, it needed to have empirical aspects. It needed to have inspect and adapt. So therefore we had human beings involved. As that process has been driven down here, then it gets into the simple area, we've been able to automate it. Everybody generally okay up to this point? Right. So this is the key question. Do we have volatility? If yes, that's where we need to use Agile. So Agile is designed for anything with inherent uncertainty or volatility. So in my experience, or our experience, that's all transformation projects and programs. I personally tend to spend around probably 75 to 80% of my time working with organisations, helping them transform either to better project management or Agile, mainly Agile nowadays. Those transformation programs, we use Agile to deliver them because transformation programs are inherently Agile, which is what Rolls-Royce found out when they did their PLM program. Support and maintenance. If we support and maintaining anything, any product, an information technology asset or any product, it's inherently volatile. The backlog of things that you need to do changes all the time. Therefore, you need to be using an Agile approach. Research and development, it's impossible to use a waterfall to do research and development because you don't know what you're analysing and designing until you actually do it. So you've got to use a do something, inspect and adapt. Do something, inspect and, yeah, get the idea? R&D. Information technology, yeah, I think the case has been made in this area now. As I say, Agile, by different names, has been going into information technology since the mid-80s. Agile sort of like had two surges, I suppose you might say. Initially, when I started in '94 doing Agile, it was very, very strong. In the UK, it was very, very strong with things like Dynamic Systems Development Method, DSDM a turn. And it sort of took off like this in the market. It then got to the late 90s, early noughties, when we had the good old millennium bug and the web businesses falling over left, right and centre, all this sort of stuff. And Agile sort of tailed off at that point. It's now come back again in 2006-07, as we've seen in the market, that the market's become very, very difficult, and Agile has now taken off again because people want to have something that A, makes sure that we deliver the right product, and B, make sure we deliver it on time and cost. So Agile has sort of like had its second coming. And rather than just being in the States and Europe, Agile is now huge in Asia. I could easily spend all my time working in Asia. I spend a lot of my time working in Asia now, but I could easily spend all of my time working in Asia. Because Agile has really done whack over the last 3 or 4 years in Asia as well. PLM, commissioning, you talked about, and venture capital. In the States, for example, if you're trying to get venture capital for an information technology business, you will not get that venture capital unless you set your business up as an Agile business. So, the penetration in the market has happened. I'm sorry, PLM stands for Product Lifecycle Management. It's how you actually deliver products such as aerospace engines, for example. What is Agile? So let's have a look at how broadly it works. Well, if we're doing a project in Agile, and that's only one style of Agile, doing Agile projects. If you're doing a project in Agile, then typically you would do some architectural thinking up front. So lorry road user charge was one of the things which was around 10 years ago. I don't know if it's still around now, but whatever. That was a very, very big program. Yeah? Up front, that needed to be architected. So we needed to understand what the architecture of that particular program was going to be. From that point in Agile, what you would then do is you would inspect and adapt going forward. So you do a sprint or iteration, a short period of time, developing something, then seeing if the world has changed and adapting to it, develop, etc. as you go through. At the end of each of these iterations, these short bursts of dynamic effort to create something, basically you aim to have a working solution. Now, that working solution could be put live, or that working solution could be put into a release holding area and kept back for a few months and then put live from a release. Whatever makes sense in the business at hand. Most, not all by any means, but most information technology companies nowadays tend to go for 3-month releases and 2-week iterations or sprints. Yes? Lots of information technology organizations release on 2-week sprints, so they just release at the end of every sprint. Agile gives you the flexibility to do whatever it is which makes sense. You could release every day, you could release after every sprint, you release after every release, you could release after a group of releases, whatever makes sense. But the way it works is, just to reiterate, once we've got that architecture, and that's not detailed analysis and design, once you've got that architecture, basically as we evolve going forward, we always aim to have a working solution out of every sprint. So we've always got a working code base in an information technology style. By the way, I should have asked right up front, how many of you are information technology background? Could you just put your hands up? So most, but not all. Good. All right. So I'll sort of talk more IT, not only IT speak, but more IT speak. What I didn't want to do is talk to you about IT if you were mainly business people. Okay. So from the end of every sprint, working solution. We also have 2 ceremonies in some styles of Agile called a retrospective. A retrospective is basically a continuous improvement process. So at the end of every 2 to 4 week sprint or iteration, what we do is the team saying what went well, what went badly, and most importantly, what are we going to do differently in the next sprint. So you've very much got continuous improvement built into the way you work, which is obviously very good for CMMI. You also have something called a sprint review. Now, a sprint review basically means the stakeholders, whoever the stakeholders are related to that product that we're delivering, they come along to a sprint review at the end of every sprint. We don't show them detailed specifications, etc., etc., etc. What we show them is this is what we've actually delivered. And that gives the stakeholder the ability to say, okay, fair enough, for this part of the system, yep, I can see that's right. Or alternatively, they can say, it's sort of right, but it needs a bit of change. So what we're doing when we talk to stakeholders, we're not We're not giving them hugely detailed specifications of X, Y, Z, yes, with the inherent problems there are in doing that. What we do is we show them the working system. We show them this bit of the system, then this bit and that bit, then this bit, that bit and that bit. So we show them the system as it evolves going forward. And that tends to make it a hell of a lot easier for stakeholders to get to tie into what we're doing. Everybody okay on the speed front that I'm going through this? Because I'm turbocharging through this pretty quick. Cool. Agile myths. Implementing Agile is easy. On one team of around anywhere between 5 to 9 people, it generally takes, depending on where you're starting from, about 3 months to get people to a point that they can start sort of running on their own, around 3 months. That's relatively easy. Transforming an organisation isn't, because you're talking, basically, when you're talking about Agile, you're talking about mindsets, you're talking about culture, yeah? You're talking about the way people have been working for a long, long time. And if you're talking about a traditional waterfall delivery approach, as opposed to an Agile approach, they are very, very different. By the way, a common misconception is that you can't use Prince2 or MSP or ITIL, etc. with Agile. That is rubbish. You can use Prince2, MS. You can use all of this stuff with Agile. I personally have done it numerous times since 1994. We did it at Customs and Excise 10 years ago. You can definitely integrate them. Yeah. So the thing is, Prince2, Projects in Controlled Environments, of version 2, is designed for project management. It doesn't say anything about delivery cycles. Sometimes what people do is they think Prince2 means waterfall. It doesn't. Prince2 is a project management cycle. Waterfall is a delivery cycle. You can take out waterfall and you can plug in anything else you want to into Prince2. Not hugely, no. I mean, that's structured systems analysis design method. That is aligned to a waterfall way of delivery. There are 1 or 2 pages in the Prince manual that says, you know, if you've got this sort of delivery cycle, this is what you would do. But on about the 3rd page of the Prince2 manual, it says what you should do is customize Prince2 to that which is suited. So Prince2, Prince2. If we look at a traditional waterfall, analysis, design, build, test, implement, I always get these the wrong way around. So, oh, well, hold on. That's a delivery cycle. If we look at Prince2, and I always get the first 2 phases of Prince2 wrong way around, so just before I do that, I'll apologise before I do it. Initiate project, startup. Is that the wrong way around? Probably is. I normally do. Manage stage boundaries. Let's say we put analysis and design together, manage stage boundaries, control stage, manage work packages. Let's say we have a number of releases, so we do build and test a number of times, number of releases in this project, manage stage boundaries, close project, direct project, control stage, manage work package. So what I've drawn there in green is a project management life cycle. In this case, it's defined by Prince2. It's different in PMBOK, Project Management Institute, but this is Prince2's version. Prince2 is designed to wrap around any delivery cycle. That's what it's designed to do. Prince2 isn't waterfall. So what you could just as easily do, you could take out that there and that there, that there and that there, that there. You could put in a release with sprints. That's Agile in Prince2. However, what I would suggest is there is something on the market called Agile Project Management. Now, this is from APMG, who push forward Prince2, and the DSTM consortium. And this is basically a combination of the concepts within DSTM and the concepts within Prince2, and it's shaped together specifically to do Agile Project Management. So I would suggest use that. But you could use you could use Prince2, whatever. As I say, we have wrapped this together a number of times with any Agile approach. Everybody okay up to this point? So implementing Agile is easy. In one team, relatively, across a business, nah, because you're talking about mindset change, you're talking culture change. Agile gives instant benefit. Just going to go to the other board now, just to annoy Jose. Agile gives instant benefit. It might do, it might not. If we think about a transformation change life cycle, capability, so we want to increase capability, and here's time. The classic S-curve, which I'm sure you're all aware of, sort of goes like that. capability goes down before it goes up. Yeah? Now, if you're doing any change, changing to a new information technology tool, a new environment, a new way of doing things, the chances are it'll go down before it goes up. It's known as the learning curve. That is the learning curve that you're actually seeing there. Now, that comes down to how you do the implication. You can make that learning curve very short and shallow. Basically, if you know how to do this, if you know how to implement this sort of stuff and how to transform an organisation, that learning curve can be very long and deep if you do it wrong. And sadly, there's been quite a few organisations, sadly, in the market who have done it wrong, and it's cost them a hell of a lot of money. So Agile gives instant benefit. It might not. Depends where you're starting from. Agile means no documentation is a myth. What we do in Agile is we say, here are the basics of the documentation which we require to deliver in an Agile way. What you then do is add in anything else you need. So, let's say, for example, we were using any of the Agile approaches within a Prince2 environment. You need a PID. If you're going to deliver in a project, you need a business case. There's no point doing a project unless you've got a business case. That's the whole point. Yeah? So, these extra things, you just add them in. So this idea of Agile giving no documentation is fundamentally incorrect. What Agile assumes is that we're working with professional folks. So in other words, people who are developing J2E software know how to develop, or software in a J2E environment know how to do that. Therefore, they know the sort of artifacts that they need to develop with. So you add them in. Whatever adds value, you add them in. But the key words here are adds value. If the product doesn't add value, don't do it. Yeah. So just to synopsize that again, Agile says, all the Agile approaches say, here's the basics. Here's the basic stuff that you need to deliver successfully. If you need to put something in that adds value, add it in. I personally, if I'm doing Agile in a project, which is not the only way to deliver stuff, but if you are doing Agile in a project, I would always have a business case, because there's no point having project governance if you don't have a business case. So Agile means no documentation and myth. Agile means hacking. No, Agile is actually very, very disciplined. It's a very disciplined way of doing things. Hacking means hacking. What you see on the market is that people do either Wagile, which is basically they keep doing Waterfall, but they call it by Agile names and then say it's Agile when it's not. They're just doing Waterfall. Or they do Fragile. Fragile means they're just hacking. They're not doing any documentation. They're not, aligning with what the business wants. There's no business case there, stashing the benefits. It's not Agile, that's hacking. Yeah? So Agile is very, very disciplined, and it's very, very clear within the different Agile frameworks, Scrum, DSGM, Extreme Programming, FDD, Crystal, Lean, there's lots of them. In the different frameworks, they are very, very clear about the discipline behind working in this way. Agile means poor quality. If you do Fragile, it will mean poor quality. If you do Agile properly, it will mean correct quality, whatever that level of quality is. Agile is a silver bullet? Nah. What Agile is a collection of best practice. All of the Agile frameworks are collections of learnt best practice. The different frameworks basically take different collections of best practice into the way they describe Agile. The way I think of it, if it helps, this is just me, is that the best practice that we see out there on the market, which has been learnt over the last 50 years of doing information technology, are like musical notes. Yes? So, lots of different frameworks use those musical notes in different ways. What a framework is, like Scrum or DSGM, is basically a collection of those musical notes which creates a song. So that song's unique, and that song makes sense to itself, if you see what I mean. However, if you're trying to do something in a business, you'll need more than one song. So it's about bringing together in a pragmatic way, typically different Agile frameworks to work in your environment. And this is exactly what we did in the BCL, the Business Change Lifecycle. Okay? Now, I'll make a suggestion a little bit later on for what my guess would be might work here. I don't know, but we'll have a quick look. Agile, just read a book. Yeah, damn good idea. But just be aware, though, that generally in the book, not always, but generally in the books, when they're talking about Agile, they're talking about one team. They're not talking about how to transform an organisation like HMRC. Agile only relates to software. Nope, you can use it for anything. If you're delivering products or you're delivering projects, you can Agile for it. You can use Agile for it. Agile is new? Nah. Mid to late 80s. Yeah. The term Agile came around in the year 2000, but we've been doing these sorts of things since the year dot. And indeed, Agile, if you actually think back to this, this idea of hey, we're working in a volatile world, therefore we need to inspect and adapt. This is how human beings work. Yeah? This is how we interact as human beings with the day-to-day world. This is how chaos theory works. This is how evolutionary theory works. Yeah? So this concept of inspect and adapt and constantly staying in contact with a changing world is how we work. The waterfall construct is a construct that I would guess has been made up over the last 12, 15,000 years or so since we've been starting building stuff. It's a good construct, but it's nowhere near as old as this agile way of thinking, which is our default way of thinking. So it's not new. It's been around a long time. Traditional waterfall delivery never works is a myth. Traditional waterfall delivery is an excellent approach. However, it's not suited to environments within which you get volatility. It's not designed for environments within which you get volatility. It's designed for civil engineering, where you do full analysis, full design, you create a full blueprint via an architect, then get the builder involved, and you build exactly what's on that blueprint. That's what it's designed for. It's not designed where you get lots of change, like IT. But traditional delivery is fine, where you haven't got change. Agile replaces everything that's gone before is a huge mistake. All organisations I work with have some really good best practices in place. Some things work, some things don't. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater if you do this. Be careful, be careful what you're doing. Agile means no planning, just do it. In Agile, you do as much planning, if not more planning, than you would do in Waterfall. But you do it differently, and you do it at different times. Yeah, statistics. A personal thing, I'm not the greatest lover of statistics. Amazingly, anybody who's on the Agile BCS committee will come to you and say, oh, look, Agile's wonderful, and here's 1,000 stats to prove it. But I've just, for those of you who are interested in stats, excuse me, this is something from the Cutter Consortium back in 2007. I don't think the Cutter Consortium have a particular axe to grind to say whether Agile's good, bad, or indifferent, so they're not an Agile company per se. Yeah, in my experience, 39% less staff. It's very, very, very rare, in my experience, that staff leave organisations when this is done. Generally, what happens is we do more. Cumulative defects, 83%. Yep, sounds about right. 24% faster is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Depends where you're starting from. That could easily be hundreds of percents. Project cost, yeah, maybe. So, just a few stats. What I'd now like to do is, we've sort of introduced what Agile is and where it's come from. I'd like to just have a look at what's the core of what Agile's about. Yeah? And that's really what I want to get into here. Now, this diagram is from Standish Group. Again, it's statistics. The reason I'm using this Standish Group slide is that, again, the Standish Group are a market research company. They're not an information technology company. They're not an Agile company. So they've got no axe to grind to say Agile's good, bad, or indifferent. They don't really care. Okay? I'm using 2002 because Waterfall was a lot more prevalent in information technology then than it is now. Yeah? So they did this study across a couple of thousand projects in the US and Europe. They didn't do the study in Asia. And what they found out is that basically for software produced using the main approaches we used then, which was Waterfall, 45% of what was produced was never actually used by anybody. 77% was always used. Well, you can see what's on the slide, but that is a bit of a bummer if you're an information technology expert. 45% of what we spend our lives producing, nobody ever uses. Whether you agree or disagree with that figure, I think we would probably all agree that when we create products using a waterfall and things are changing, there is a significant risk that what we'll create will be out of date on the day that we create it. And basically, the longer you wait for that creation to occur, the more out of date it will be. I spent about a year working on Libra. Great people working on Libra, DCA as it was then, Department of Constitutional Affairs. Libra is the system which replaces the courts management systems in the UK. Yeah? Really good program, really good project. But one of the things which struck me when I first started joining that team was A, the requirement spec I couldn't get my hand round, and it was 12 years old. So, this is the sort of thing. If you've got a 12-year-old requirement spec, it ain't going to be mirroring what the business wants today. So, this sort of thing. Yeah. So, better products. So let's have a look at why this sort of thing occurs. Now, I'm going to do a compare and contrast to Agile to Waterfall. This might come across as Agile good, Waterfall bad. It's not meant to come across that way. What I'm talking here about is in volatile environments, why Waterfall causes a problem. So there's a waterfall. Do all the analysis. What a waterfall is, by the way, which I'm sure you all know, but waterfall means that you do all the analysis, then you waterfall down to the design, then you do all that, then you waterfall down to the build, waterfall down to the test, waterfall down to the deploy. By the way, I'm not sure if you're aware, have you heard of a group called the Institute for Government? Have you heard of the Cabinet Office? Francis Maud? Yeah, I thought you might have. So the OGC, as was, now exists within the Cabinet Office under Francis Maud. Institute for Government basically produced a report early 2011, which was quite abrupt, shall we say, quite upfront with what they saw the problems with information, public sector IT was. They mentioned a number of things, but out of the three major recommendations, one was stop doing projects over £10 million each. Now, I've worked on Spine, Libra, e-Borders, which are all multi-billion pound. So to stop doing things over 10 million quid was one. Another one was start using cloud computing. And the other one was start using Agile. Now, that one, the Agile one, has gained great penetration. Maud has basically said that all central government departments must do at least one Agile project by the end of April this year. Now, I don't know if that's happening or not, to be honest, but that's what Maud has dictated into the UK environment. So, via the Cabinet Office, there is now a special group, and I can't remember the name of it, but Jose will remember. Eh? You can't remember either? Bottomless. So there's basically a group in government now who's related to the Cabinet Office, who are the specialist Agile group. So broadly what's happening, this is happening. How fast it will happen is a different question, but it's coming. This is coming down the line nowadays. When we, 10 years ago, when we were working in customs, as was back then, or 12 years ago, whenever it was, we were basically at the forefront. It then went to the Home Office. It then went to the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister, the Business Change Life Cycle. So it started to be used there, but there wasn't a central drive. There is now. So there's interesting environments at the moment in your businesses. So better products. Here's a waterfall. What we do from a waterfall is we produce typically a requirement specification, functional specification, design spec, and possibly technical specifications. So in essence, we're offering a carrot to the customer, and hopefully we're going to be talking to the customer when we actually create those analytical products in a waterfall. What we then do is we go off and do, if you're talking about IT, we go off and do our IT stuff, my world, pointy head world, my world, the more technical stuff where we do the build, the design, the testing. We then come back at the point that we've built this thing to the customer, and the serious risk is that the customer says, oh, yeah, it's all very nice, but no good for us. Yeah. So in other words, we produce something that the customer doesn't actually want on the day that we deliver it. Now, there's a number of reasons for this. Oh, that's the 45% which Standish were talking about. There's a number of reasons for this. It could be that the business need has changed. So using a silly example, it could be we originally had a business case that we wanted something to go from position A to position B. Yeah? We need to do some architecture work. So we need to architect, what is this thing? Is it an intergalactic rocket ship? Is it an oil tanker? Is it a bus? Is it a Ferrari? Is it a bicycle? What is it? So via the architecture work, the high-level architecture, we would ascertain it's a bicycle. So at the start of the project, we'd say, OK, we're going to architect a bicycle. So we'd architect that. As we go through the project, it may turn out that our business case changes. We want to get from position A to position B, and we want to get from position A to position C at the same time. So what we actually now need is 2 unicycles. Now, an Agile delivery will allow you to do this, move from a bicycle to 2 unicycles. What it wouldn't allow you to do is move from a bicycle to create a Ferrari or create an intergalactic rocket ship. So you can't do magic per se, but Agile does allow you to be agile. It does allow you to change that which you're delivering during the time it's being delivered. That's why it's called Agile. Everybody okay? If we did this in a waterfall, then obviously what we would produce is the bicycle, and sadly we would probably produce the bicycle over time and over cost as well, sadly. Why does this happen? Well, the longer this time period is, if we've basically produced very detailed specifications, and we've then agreed that with the project board, and we've said to the project board, with exactly these people, in exactly this time, we're going to produce exactly this product that is defined exactly in these specifications, we're pretending that all of a sudden we can tell the future. Human beings can't tell the future. What we can do is make educated guesses, and that's what planning and estimating is, an educated guess. This is what Prince 2 calls baseline plans and commitment plans. A baseline plan means, to the baseline of our knowledge today, this is our best guess that we'll deliver in 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is. Yeah? The problem comes up if we do these detailed specifications, we then tie them down totally, and we deliver exactly that without mirroring any change which occurs throughout the delivery life cycle. If we do that, then by definition, all we're forcing is delivery of the wrong product. That's one issue. Another issue is, for those of you who, I know there's some senior managers in the room, for those of you who, because I recognise you, who are senior managers, when you get given detailed specifications, 6 of them a week, how often do you read them? So the customers of our information technology specifications, etc., how often do they really get read by the customers? How often did a specification I can't put my hands around, which is 12 years old, get read by the customers and totally understood by the customers? So there is generally an issue, as we produce more and more information within our specifications, there is a risk that the customer won't read them. The people who are actually developing this software for won't have read the spec. So what we have is we create a requirement specification which is X% wrong. We then base our functional specification on that requirement spec, that functional spec is 2X% wrong. We base the design spec on the functional spec, that's now 3X% wrong. You can see where I'm going with this. So we create a number of specifications which are wrong. Could be 5% wrong, could be 50% wrong, could be 80% wrong, we don't know. We then tie that down totally, yes? We then basically deliver against that whilst the business is changing. It's actually quite surprising that's only 45%. This isn't the fault of Waterfall. Waterfall's a good delivery approach. It's the fault of we're trying to work in a changing world with using an approach that isn't suited to it. So what we do in Agile is we do create something, we inspect the real world and adapt to it, create something, inspect and adapt, create, inspect and adapt, create, inspect and adapt, with input from the customer, create, inspect and adapt. So what we actually deliver is that which is correct on the day of delivery, not what we thought was correct 6 months, a year, 2 years ago. Okay? So about delivering the right thing. That's all very nice, but we might deliver the right thing, but it might take us 3 times longer than we thought because we're continually prototyping around something. We never actually finish it. So how do we do this on time and cost? Well, what a waterfall does is, whether we mean it to or not, it fixes the features and it flexes the time and cost. So let's have a look at this. We create specifications that fix the features of the asset that we're actually producing. We then agree those specifications with the project board. Any project manager worth their salt who's using a waterfall knows that if that changes, it's going to make the time and cost slip, and that will reflect badly on them and the team. And in fact, generally in today's world, project managers are measured by, did you deliver this on time and cost? What's the implication of that? You produce the specs, you could apply Prince 2 change control, but you don't. Yeah? So you fix the specs and they stay fixed. Well, if you're working in a changing world, all that will force is delivery of the wrong product. Everybody okay? So, we fix the features, we flex the time and cost. So what happens when reality hits this model? And what I mean by reality is requirements might change, people go ill, technology doesn't work, whatever, reality. What happens when reality hits this model? Well, immediately you've got the features fixed in the specs which were signed off. You don't want to go through change control because it's going to take you a hell of a long time to do that. It's a very difficult thing to do. We call it scope creep. We don't like scope creep. So this tends to happen. Time starts to slip. Well, we don't like time slippage on information technology projects, so what do we do? Well, the only thing we can really do is we can flex it. I'll come back to quality later on, is we flex the cost. Now, if you're talking about application development, cost is people. So one thing we could do is throw some more people at the problem. Yeah? Now, amazingly, if you're working with a supplier who supplies all your people and you go to that supplier and say, we've got a problem, what's their answer going to be? Ooh, have some more people. So what happens is we have a problem, basically the time starts to slip, we throw some people at it to fix the problem. Is it a good idea to throw people at problems? Will it make it better? I can see quite a few in the room. Now, there's been loads of articles and books written about this. Basically, if you just throw people at problems, it creates unscheduled work. It also creates a situation that the dynamism of the team tends to get destroyed because you put a new set of human beings into a set of human beings who were operating effectively previously. Now, there's been loads of stuff written about this. Probably the most famous one is something called the Mythical Man Month. This isn't a new book. This is about 20, 25 years old. The Mythical Man Month talks specifically about just throwing people at the problem won't, it may or may not sort the problem out, but you're running a very serious risk that it won't. It will actually make it significantly worse. So, what do we see on some large projects and programs? Well, what you see is the features are fixed, 12 years old. The time is fixed, the cost is fixed. We start having problems, time slips, we then throw some people at it. Well, throwing some people at it makes the time slip. So you throw some people at it, which makes the time slip. So you throw some people at it, which makes the time slip. So you throw some people at it, which makes the time slip. So you throw some people at it, which makes the time slip. Spine, Libra, E-borders. Right? What happens is it goes out of control. What happens is the project becomes a self-generating project. The project isn't there anymore to deliver products. The project is there to keep the project going. All right? Now, this doesn't always happen, but it's a significant risk if we work in this way. The other significant risk is quality. Real world, what happens when you're in a waterfall? You've done the analysis, you've done the design, you've made the promises. I can tell the future. You've made the promises again for that future. You then get to a situation that you're getting towards the end of the build phase, and realities hit you. Well, what's going to happen is you haven't delivered the functionality that you promised. Yeah. So in reality, what tends to happen is we start to slip the quality. We shouldn't, but we do. We start to squeeze the testing. We start to say, all right, we should be aligning to this architecture, but we haven't really got time. We start saying, oh, we should be aligning to the dictates of Prince 2 or whatever it is, but we haven't got time. Well, we're not going to create the user documentation because we haven't got time. And what actually happens is you start hacking. So you significantly reduce the quality. And you're forced into this situation. If you've been through a detailed analysis, a detailed design, you pretend you can tell the future, and then you get to the end of that phase. Now, if what I am saying is correct, because I might just be totally wrong in what I'm saying, if what I am saying is correct, then what you would expect to see in legacy applications that have been produced in this way is that those legacy applications would be badly documented, badly designed, badly architected, badly coded, and next to impossible to maintain. That's what you would expect to see if what I am saying is correct. That's what you do see on a worldwide basis. Okay? This is one of the reasons why you see it. We're using the wrong approach in the wrong environment. Agile. So Agile is not a silver bullet, remember. This might be coming over that Agile solve all ills. It doesn't, but it solves the sort of things I'm talking about. Agile, what we do is we fix the time, cost, quality. What we do is we flex the features. We don't drop the features, we flex the features. Now let me explain that in a bit more detail, if I may. The concept of a short sprint or a release is like what I call an agile glass of water. So what we have, when we think about delivering something, delivering any product, an information technology asset, a new way of delivering engines, whatever it is, basically what you have is a list of changes that you require related to this thing that you're trying to do. Yeah? There's no concept of time on that log. So in other words, when you create an HMRC asset, it's not as if you do a project for a year and then you stop maintaining that asset after that. You still do support and maintenance on that asset. So in essence, there is a list of things that need to be done. Part of that list may well be done within a project, and then you might use product or portfolio management to keep going from that point on. Okay. So looking at a release, let's say we've got let's make it a 3-month release. Excuse me. So we've got a 3-month release. The sprints within that 3-month release, sprints or iterations, these are these short focused periods of time. The way to consider these is as what I would call agile glasses of water. So if we consider our log of things we want to do, yes, prioritized requirements list in DSTM terminology, if we consider our prioritized requirements list, what we do when we do release planning and project planning is, in essence, as long as we understand the size of these things, the requirements, or stories, as they're called in Agile, as long as we understand the size of these, and we understand the size of the glasses, we can just pour in the water that's in, if you consider this to be a jug full of water, and these empty glasses, if you understand these and these in the same unit, you can just pour in and basically fill up the glasses. That is basically how you do Agile release planning, and what that tells you is what you can do in this release. If we use a prioritization method like must, should, and could, then within our glasses, the musts are down the bottom, the shoulds are there, and the coulds are here. Now, if we sort of have a tap here, just nicking one of Jose's ideas, which he told me about 15 minutes ago, if you just put a tap here, what gets delivered first is the highest priority stuff, the musts. Yeah? If something more important comes in, what happens if you pour water into a full glass? Water overflows. What happens if you assume the glass size was this, but the glass size gets smaller and other people go ill? Water overflows. So that is the basic concept of how Agile delivers on time and cost. If something comes in, something goes out. You are always focusing on that which is highest priority. Now, the implication of this, from a customer's perspective, is that you can guarantee from an Agile-driven information technology delivery, at the end of it, you always get the most important features. You can guarantee that because you've constantly been focusing on the changing features. Yeah? So at the end of every sprint, at least, we're going to look at the real world and we're going to change that feature list to that which maps to the real world. So we are always getting bang for buck from our incredibly expensive, scarce, highly skilled information technology resource. So you really are concentrating money big time. Yeah? There is likely to be, as things move around, there is likely to be some things, if I can get this to, there we go, some things that will go off the back of this project. But hey, it's not as if they will never be done. They're on the backlog, they just haven't been done in this project. So they may well be done in the support and maintenance cycle. But then again, looking at these things, these are by definition the lowest priority stuff. Do we really want to spend money in HMRC on the lower priority stuff, or do we want to focus our funds on the highest priority stuff? This gives us the ability to always focus on the highest priority stuff. This stuff might actually not be required anyway. Do you remember our silly analogy of the bike and the 2 unicycles? If during this project or during this release we thought we needed a bike here, but over time we've basically had to change, if we change to 2 unicycles, we don't need the handlebars, we don't need the crossbar, we don't need that crossbar. Yeah, get the idea? What we do need is an extra saddle. What we do need is an extra chain gear. Well, if we're using Agile, basically the handlebars and the crossbars just get prioritized off the back. You don't do them. So in other words, they don't go into the system. 2 implications. That means you can do the saddle and the extra chain gear for free because you've got time available. It also means you don't get a load of stuff in the system that you need to support and maintain that nobody ever uses. Everybody okay? So this stuff, a very common accusation thrown at Agile is, oh, you just make it up as you go along and you just chuck stuff off the back. No. What you should be doing, if you're working in a changing world, you've got to change what you're doing. As you change what you're doing, some things must go off the back of the project. They must. What's the point in creating the handlebars if we don't want a bicycle anymore? Yeah? So this is again is how Agile works. So what I've just been talking about there is basically the 3 key things that customers don't like about information technology. Generally, the 3 major accusations that customers throw at us, for those of you who are information technology professionals, is they say, IT projects, don't like them, they always deliver over budget, they always deliver late, and they always deliver the wrong thing. Well, what we've just been talking about here is how using Agile, eventually, we produce the right thing, and we produce it on time and on cost every time. So this directly addresses the 3 key issues that customers do not like about information technology. Interestingly, if you're sort of like an Agile sado like me, the reason why most organisations, certainly organisations of your size, take on Agile isn't actually to increase productivity, etc. You will get significant productivity increase, but it's not that. It's actually to produce the right products. It's to produce products that people can use and want to use, that are focused, and therefore we don't waste a lot of time producing stuff that A, nobody uses, and B, takes a hell of a lot of time to support and maintain, even though nobody really uses it. Where can we use Agile? Well, there's a number of different routes behind Agile, as we can see here. Basically, you can use it on anything that there's volatility. So back in the day, in HM Customs and Excise, why Business Change Lifecycle was called Business Change Lifecycle. Originally came in, chatted a bit about Agile, gained some interest. We did 3 projects in an Agile way, and in 3 months we saw an average of 27% improvement in productivity, which is nothing. Yeah. What then happened was that piqued the interest of the people in the organisation who were thinking about, all right, this Agile malarkey, what can we use it for? And they said, all right, we'll use it for any project or program which has an element of information technology that's going to deliver business change. That's just about everything that the organisation does. So that's what the business change lifecycle was evolved for. Now, you know, the BCL now would be a different thing, 10, 12 years down the line. Agile has evolved, and that would need to evolve as well. But, just to reiterate to you, you've done this sort of stuff before. So this is really sort of like the sort of stuff that goes in programs and project frameworks, etc. So you typically have an Agile approach for your delivery teams. That might be something like what is called extreme programming. Extreme programming is about software engineering Agile practices. That might be elements from DSDM. That might be Scrum. And then typically you would have Agile projects. I would strongly recommend Agile project management for that. Agile PM. If you want to look at this, search for Agile PM. You could then have Agile programs. I was working with the NCC 7, 8 years ago to put together something called Agile Dynamic Program Management. So this is Agile in programs. In Customs, you put something together on this over 10 years ago. Programs. So this was using MSP in an Agile environment. Okay, so this has happened before. Then you have a knowledge base or knowledge cube. In here is where you have all your things like coding standards, configuration management standards, guidelines. This is kept very, very simple. The simpler this is, the more people who will use it. The more complex this is, the less people will use it. This is kept very, very simple. This is your DNA. This is how you deliver product. This is reference material. Okay, so that's how you sort of structure these things. Agile methods, I've been sort of talking about this and not planning to spend a huge amount of time on this. XP, best practice for software engineering. Lean software development, similar. Scrum is really more about team working. And then we've got the project lifecycle ones. DSDM, Eterna, Agile Project Management, Agile Open Unified Process. BCS, we're not behind any particular Agile approach. Our view on the Agile committee is, hey, Agile, where we've got volatility, we should use Agile approaches. Our view is pragmatic. So what you do is you use whatever the right Agile approach is or what combination of Agile approaches works for the particular organisation. We don't sell or espouse any particular Agile approach. Agile Alliance is another group who basically are an alliance of Agile people, but they're not specific to any particular approach. All of these other things, there is a Scrum Alliance around here, there is a DSDM board for this, etc., etc., etc. Possible integration for HMRC. Now, I think the honest answer to this is we haven't got the faintest idea, but our guess would be, for your software engineering, these are the extreme programming practices. So we just haven't got time to go through these at the moment, I'm afraid, but it's things like refactoring. Refactoring means keep it simple. So in other words, don't design things and build things that are very, very complicated that people can't get their heads around. Actively concentrate as you build things on keeping them as simple as possible, and you do that by what is called refactoring. Continuous integration basically means don't create code sets, environments within which you have code that hasn't been tested. Continuous integration, and I think somebody was saying this a little bit earlier about daily testing. Continuous integration means that we are going to continually test things. So, the full-on version of that, for those of you who are sort of like quite reasonably technically proficient, here's a PC, branch, trunk, sit, UAT perhaps, live. What you would do is when you check in from a PC to branch, you wouldn't only check in code, you're checking code and tests. What would happen is on at least a nightly basis, you would then do an automated build of this new stuff. You would then run those tests. So in other words, at least on a nightly basis, you know that your environment in branch works. So in other words, that which you just put in hasn't made a load of other stuff in branch fall over. You then do the same in trunk, sit, UAT and live. Now most organisations sort of go here. So continuous integration is doing this here and here. This obviously means you need automated testing tools, but you should really do it across the whole environment. I would also strongly recommend do exploratory testing. So in other words, you can't only do automated scripted testing in the real world. You need to also have exploratory testing. So a flavour of the sort of thing that's within extreme programming. Software engineering practices. You need to be doing some of these to be agile, really. I mean, real agile teams do refactoring, simple design, test-driven development, continuous integration. They're like the small releases. They're like the basics, yeah, to be an agile team. Scrum is one of the ways that we can work within teams to deliver effectively. Sorry. Oh, that's the speaker. To deliver effectively. Scrum says you have a product backlog. So that is this. That's the backlog of things we need to do. Says you have a sprint backlog, which is basically the plan for each of these sprints. It says you do a sprint. Well, that's what's happening here. It says on a daily basis, what we do in the sprint is the teams synchronise. Basically, the teams say, so what I did yesterday is what I'm going to do today. Here are any blockers. So the teams synchronise to make sure that everybody understands what everybody else is doing. End of the sprint, we show the stakeholders what we've done, the sprint review. End of the sprint, we continually improve via the retrospective. But the difference here, we are continually improving. Continually. So there's every few weeks we will be changing the way we work. And this is all to create a potentially shippable increment. So that potentially shippable increment could go live, or it could be put into an area and then you could go live from a release, either or both. So Scrum values, teams commit. Within Scrum, within Agile, we assume that the teams are adult, full of adult professionals. So with professionals, that doesn't necessarily mean we're all brilliantly skilled. We may or may not be, but we're operating in a professional way. That means that when we make a commitment in a sprint, we deliver against that commitment. Focus. This is all about making sure that people understand what it is they're delivering. A while ago, I used to do project rescue work. I will guarantee you that two things are in place in projects that are failing. Guarantee you. One is that the team are in what's called storming mode, for those of you who understand Tuckman. In other words, the team are fighting each other. The other is the team won't know what they're developing. So you walk in the door and say to the team, give me an idea of what you're actually developing here, and the team will say, go and read the specs. No. Just paint a picture for me. Tell me what you're developing. Go and read the specs. No. Just tell me what you developed. Go and read the specs. No. Tell me. And they won't be able to tell you. From the program manager to the developers and everyone in between, they won't be able to tell you what they're developing. So in other words, they haven't got focus. That's a self-generating project. They're never going to deliver anything because they don't know what they're delivering. So focus. Openness is making sure everybody can see what's going on. Respect is probably obvious as human beings. We need to respect each other to basically getting to a performance state. And courage, if you're going to do this sort of stuff, agile, and you're very waterfall at the moment, and I don't know if you are or not, but if you are, for those of you in the organisation who are going to help this happen, it takes courage, because you will be laughed at and you will be attacked. I don't mean physically attacked, but people don't like change. If you're trying to implement change, people will get angry about it. So just recognise that's going to happen. But the benefits that you will accrue from doing this are absolutely huge. Not planning to go through that. Agile project management. So we've currently seen software engineering within how teams work. We're now looking at agile project management. So this is a combination of Prince2 and DSGM. The concept comes from APMG, Prince2, MSP, ITIL, MOR, APMG, and DSGM. So again, I'm not planning to go through this in detail, but the basic philosophy of agile project management is that we have processes, people, products, and practices all aligned into a number of principles. It provides a framework by which we can do agile projects. Key principles: focus on the business need, have a business case, which is what you have in your projects. Deliver on time, using the concepts I was talking about earlier on. In fact, do you remember those two triangles I used to explain here is how traditional works, here is how agile works? That's from Agile PM. Collaborate. So if we're not going to collaborate, we ain't going to deliver anything. Okay, and this means collaboration across the customer and information technology. What I described earlier on, yes, If you want to deliver the right thing on time, on cost, in other words, doing Agile, you've got to have two things in place. You've got to. One is prioritization. If you can't prioritize, Agile won't work. It's not a case of it might work and it might not. It won't work. You've got to have prioritization. The other thing you have got to have is collaboration. Okay, so those are the two basics. So in HMRC, when we're delivering assets, we need to have input from our customers through a role called a business ambassador or a product owner. But you've got to have that. Never compromise quality, but understand what quality is. You know, there might be certain circumstances where we do want low quality because we've got to get something out quick. There might be certain circumstances where we want platinum plated quality, whatever makes sense. But once we've set that quality definition, don't change it. Build incrementally from firm foundations. So yeah, we're going to work in a very dynamic, agile, iterative way, but we need to be doing that from an architecture. Develop iteratively, what I just said. Communicate continuously and clearly. Make sure that everybody understands what it is we're doing. Make sure everybody understands the focus. Demonstrate control. You won't believe this at the moment because we haven't sort of talked through enough, but if you're doing stuff in Agile, it's actually very, very difficult to be out of control if you're doing it properly, if you're following the discipline of doing Agile properly. It's very, very difficult to be out of control. However, you need to demonstrate you're in control because it's via that demonstration that we build trust. Yeah? So, demonstrate control. Agile and CMMI. With Fidelity Investments in India, we've taken Agile, DSDM in this case, to CMMI level 5. So that can be done. Numerous times taken Agile to CMMI level 3. If you look at 3, decision analysis, integrated PM, organisational process, blah, 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 this stuff here. So in essence, what we need in place is this. If you had in place XP for your software engineering practices, Scrum or DSDM for your team practices, and Agile project management, that would take you to layer 3, CMMI layer 3. How you do that is basically you build the integrated set of pragmatic Agile delivery process. Remember I was talking about the knowledge cube, and that's what you build that. Then you identify from CMMI the practices. Then you just link it in URLs. You just link down, so it becomes dead easy for the assessor. They just come into the organisation, they see your CMMI definition, and you just link them down to where that CMMI definition is met. Exactly the same way as you would do for the OGC gateways. Well, that's what we did in the BCL for the OGC gateway. That's probably me rabbited on enough.